I've had 2 of you ask me now what type of material I'm using. Probably should have made this video a long time ago. Better late than never. Since the last video was such a hit, I figured why not make another? Welcome to Wed Clay 101, sponsored by none other. That's right, we're double dipping. Then Raid Shadow Legends. Spell it out with me if you can. R, regular updates and content. There's always new stuff coming to Raid. A, arena. Test your strength against other players. I, index. You can see any champion in the game, what their skills are, and plan effective counter strategies. D, Dragon's Lair. Super important to farm here. Farm it up, baby. Oh, you thought that was it? Raid's 4th anniversary is finally here, and there's a ton to get excited about. I'm talking dedicated offers, free gifts, promo codes, events, and a brand new fusion event where you guys can get your hands on an anniversary-themed legendary champion. You're also able to take a trip down memory lane with a recap video of your stats in Raid. And for Amazon Prime members who just got Genbo, keep an eye out for the next drop with some powerful Savage gear. It's available until March 30th. With all this exciting stuff and more coming to Raid, if you haven't started playing yet, what are you waiting for? Use my link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses. We're talking an epic champion, Kellen the Shrike, and other useful things. Energy refills, magic potions, XP brews, and since it's Raid's birthday, the gifts keep coming. All new and existing players can get a bunch of free birthday gifts. Once you're in game, after clicking on the link, just enter promo code 4YearsRaid to get your hands on 4 legendary skill tomes, plus other useful stuff. It's that simple. Special thanks to Raid for sponsoring this video. Back to the show. First things first, we need a moist counter. What's a moist counter, you ask? You'll see. Lately I've been into making larger pieces, and for that, Wed Clay is tough to beat. If you're looking to walk the lonely path of a traditional sculptor and waste your life as I have, hopefully this will help provide a jumping off point. I'm only half kidding. So to start, I have an armature that's already made up. I explained in pretty good detail in my last video how to create an armature. I'm just gonna take you through this real quick. Since we're working larger, again, this is 3/8 inch armature wire. It's tied together with floral wire, and then it's just wrapped around so that it doesn't come undone. This is just a wood dowel, 2 pipe clamps. There's a hole drilled through here. This is a 5/16 threaded rod, and then some more floral wire just to hold it all together. It's a little loose as you can see, but it should have no trouble supporting the downward weight that we're gonna put on it. Next up, there's just 3 little pieces of pine board that I drilled a hole into. It's also screwed up in through the bottom, and that's basically it. There are lots of different ways to make an armature. As long as it supports the clay and doesn't show on the outside of the sculpt, you should be fine. If you're having trouble figuring out what size to make it, the best thing to do is either print out reference material, or if you have a live subject, you can usually just caliper off them and kind of figure that out. One of the main things you have to do when using Wed Clay, you're gonna wanna constantly spray it down with water while you're working, and at night, at the end of each session, you're gonna wanna wrap it up and keep it moist. Moist. Luckily, I'm an expert on that, so I'll show you how to do it. Stop that, it's not that kind of channel. Now, one of the main questions I get asked is what happens to the sculpt after it's finished. This is a sculpt from my last video. If you look in here, you can see a big crack. These little spikes have started to come apart. These aren't even Wed Clay. This was actually polymer clay that I just inserted in there, so you can see how it just started to lift off. This white stuff, a little bit of mold that's formed around the outsides. This piece up top here broke off, and I just glued it back on for this video. If I spin them around, just how bad the material started to crack, and it's even kind of loose. It becomes real brittle. You can see it's all splitting apart from the base and chipping off. Got a little crack here that started to develop. Some more cracks underneath. And since the clay has shrunk, it just doesn't look as good as it did when it was first sculpted. If I get a little closer, if you compare this to the video, you can see the texture's changed a little bit as well. Now, I might have been able to save this if I had removed them from the armature and tried to fish out the wires, but this wasn't a production piece and it was never meant to be copied or displayed in public, so I didn't bother molding it. While you could keep it and display it like this, really you'd want to mold this to save all your hard work and display it forever. As for this, I'm out of space, so I'll probably just give this to my friend Mike and let him deal with it. Let's do a quick sketch and we can get into it more. I usually start by filling this cavity with paper or foil, and that just saves a little bit of weight, time, and material. I'm not gonna pack this super tight because this is a skeleton, so I know I'm gonna go deep with the clay and I don't wanna run into this too much. If I get to that point, I'll be able to push it back and repack it with clay just enough so that it's not in the way. Now I'm just going to use some masking tape and tape around it to hold everything together. I'm going to use the paper and bulk the shoulders out a lot more down here too. Now I'll just cut up the clay and start bulking things out. At this point, I just need to get clay in the armature. you can cut slabs instead of just grabbing hunks that might be a different size. You just want to get the clay on the armature however you can. I'm trying to build things up as evenly as possible. This is going to be about a life-size bust, so there'll be a lot of clay on here. Being able to build up the forms quickly allows you to make quick adjustments. That's sometimes better so that your eyes don't get adjusted to what you're seeing. You can pick problem areas out a little bit easier. All right, brick 2. I've ordered this from Amazon before. It wound up coming in different colors, which is a big problem for me right in the middle of a project. So shout out to Monster Makers in Ohio. I like to order from them. Really good people over there, good customer service. They'll take good care of you. This is also really important too. You want to make sure you don't freeze this however it's being delivered. If you live on the East Coast like I do, you kind of take things in your own hands because it obviously gets really cold over here. And if you freeze it, you can change the properties of the clay. It's sold in 25-pound bricks. Usually I go through about 1.5 of these for a life-size or bigger bust depending. It's pretty cheap clay considering how much you get, but the shipping does kind of suck. All right, so we have the basic bust shape roughed in, and I haven't introduced any tools yet. This has all just been with my fingers. I kind of use this sort of clawing motion. This just kind of helps to even things out and just lightly smooth over areas. Even though this character is a skeleton, you'd still want to build up a little bit of mass because there are forms underneath to kind of make it read as if there's a body under the clothes. Anytime you sculpt something with clothes, you want to make sure that you sculpt the forms underneath and then go ahead and sculpt the clothes on top of those forms because it'll make for a much more believable piece. It's way easier than trying to carve things in after the fact. As far as reference, I don't have a ton that I'm going off of. I do have this little skull. Shout out to Bone Clones for providing this. This is a super accurate half-scale human replica skull, so I'm gonna use this. Got a couple of screenshots, of course. This is from one of the Raid Shadow Legends commercials. If you haven't watched them, definitely go check them out because this character is super funny, and he's one of the main reasons I wanted to do this project. And then aside from all that, one of the coolest things is that if you go to Raid Shadow Legends, there's like a character model viewer and you can kind of spin these guys around, take a look. This type of thing is invaluable when you're sculpting. It's a really cool feature and I love when video games do that. So even though this character is a skeleton, I still wanted to put a neck on here because he's going to have a hood and some chainmail and all this stuff. There's going to be a lot of weight here that I want supported, and I'll probably sculpt a little bit of the spinal column inside. Maybe, depending if I can see it. I'm gonna start roughing in the Death Knight's face. Even though it's just a skeleton, there's still a likeness in there. But this is gonna be a quick sketch, so don't expect a masterpiece. And what do we do while we're working with wet clay? Keep it moist. All right, as you probably just saw, I introduced a couple of tools there. This is a tool that I made from a piece of red heart. It's got a nice little spatula on the end, and then this little angle for cutting in lines and establishing planes and stuff. Really useful tool. Next up, this is a loop/rake tool that I turned out of a piece of walnut. I used a brass rod for the ferrules, then a piece of hardened piano or music wire that you can pick up at any hobby shop. It's bent over a form. I put teeth in one side and then sharpened the other edge to make it a little more chisel-like. So the side with the teeth rakes the surface like a garden rake. It actually makes the cut less aggressive and offers a little more control so you can kind of draw and sketch with the tool. You use a rake to basically unify and harmonize the surface. Everybody always asks me how I get my surfaces so clean and smooth. Most of it is done with the elbow grease you kind of put up front to clean up the form. You can have a surface that's wavy and uneven, but still smooth. You fix that by using one of these. Plus the rake marks look cool, kind of gives it that handmade feel and adds a little bit of dynamicism and texture to the sculpt. It can also offer some insight into the sculptor's thought process if you know what to look for. So as a sculptor, this is your best friend. And this is just a cheapo tool that I bought. I cleaned up the bends and tuned up the edges just a little bit. My advice would be to just pick up a few of these because they're only a couple of bucks. Put some coarse teeth in there, put some fine teeth in there, sharpen the edges, see what you like. On softer clays like wed clay, Chavant, soft or medium, you might not even really want a chiseled edge. You might actually prefer the round wire as it is. You don't even really wind up using that many tools in softer materials, and sometimes that might work better for you, but I like to try to experiment as much as I can and find out what I like, and I would advise you to do the same. So yeah, buy a bunch of these, or you can buy ones that I'll be offering soon from my hands to yours. So stay tuned here or follow my socials for more info on that. All right, back to work. Next up, I'll punch up some of the nuances and dial in the likeness. Then I'll start adding the armor, put the eyes in, the teeth. It is just a sketch, but I'm gonna detail it just a little bit. Not much to explain here, but practice and careful observation. One of the great things about working in a larger scale is that it makes found objects easier to use. Here's the thing, sculpting chainmail sucks. If you can avoid sculpting chainmail, avoid sculpting chainmail. It can be done, it gets a little easier at a smaller scale, still not recommended. Plus, in a world of AI, digital art, and 3D printing, ain't nobody got time for that. Now, since I'd like to see my family again someday, I'm gonna just use this. But you're gonna turn your head the other way, and I'm gonna slip this over my guy here and paint it, and I won't tell your partner how many times you rewinded that part of me saying moist over and over again. All right, we good? Good. Look, okay, I wasn't gonna tell on you anyway. I ain't no narc. Whatever, let's keep going. All right, and here's our completed sculpt. I know that was a lot to digest, so I'm gonna take you through things real quick. Starting with the face shield up top, the thing with wet clay is that it air dries, so it gets a little more firm as it's drying. Normally, I wouldn't do this like this. I'm a little pressed for time, so I improvised. Basically, I was able to hold this in my hand while I was shaping it. It firmed up enough so that I could slick it with the clay slick. I was able to just use drill bits to drill the holes, and then I carved these out with a little square loop. I did it just to show it was possible. There's no handbook to this stuff, and honestly, I'd have to think about it a little more but maybe a quick trip to the dollar store or the craft store, whatever. Try to find like a bowl, something that was already close in shape. Maybe I could heat that up and use that. It'd be a little lighter, a little thinner. You could probably print out a template, make this whole thing way cleaner. You could even use some wire mesh as an armature for the inside support for this. Way easier to mold if you wanted to, which is a whole other, far beyond the scope of this video. This is just hat cloth that I ripped apart in little pieces to kind of give this little furry texture here. The insides of the eyes I painted black, give things a little more contrast. This is clearly not the best, but you know, it gets the point across. I can't really get too much into the complexities of wrinkles and drapery and clothing folds. It's a little far beyond the scope of this video, but I can say that this is where a lot of careful observation comes in. The good news is people wear clothes all around us, so knock yourself out without being a creep. Of course, I got to give a shout out to my better half Lindsay for taking the reins on these arrows so that I could get this project done in time and sleep tonight. All these are oak dowels with some cardstock that was snipped with scissors. There's a slot cut in so that you can slide the cardstock in. A couple of these are snapped off and then painted the same color as the clay for a cohesive look. The little rivets are self-explanatory. For the piping on the helmet, I used a clay extruder. Of course, we have the band around the head. This, again, as you saw in the video, I just put on in a big slab and then shaped it with my fingers. You can see how easy this stuff, it shapes so easily. The rags on the side of his helmet, just shaped with my little hardwood tool here. The straps and the buckles, of course, are quite messy. I'm sure you could find a strap and a buckle that would have fit this perfectly. Any Army Navy surplus store, hobby shop, craft store. I wanted to try to sculpt as much of this as I could just to show what was possible. And then a quick note on that is if I were to do this project a little differently, I probably would have used more found objects, but that wasn't the purpose of this video. The thing to remember with your own projects is that there's no handbook for this stuff, so just get creative. Now, one more thing I'll show you is how to wrap the sculpt up if you want to work on it for more than a few days or weeks or whatever, or if you go out to lunch or something. Most of the time your sculpt's probably going to have fragile parts on it, especially like this face shield up here. So what I've done is just taken a couple more dowels and inserted them into the top of the sculpt, and then when I want to continue working on it, I'll just remove the dowels and it's like 2 seconds to patch. So you may have to get creative. The basics of it, if you know you're going to be working on it for a really long time, you might want to cover it with soaking wet paper towels, but most of the time all you need to do is just spray it down like that and it should be fine. This is just plastic tarp that you can get at any hardware store. And just open it up, lay it over, and then close up the bottom. And that, my friends, is how you keep it moist. I need to give a shout out to my Patreon. Thank you again to Raid for sponsoring this video, allowing me to eat this month. Again, only half kidding. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments. I don't know if you noticed, but I like to comment back to as many comments as I possibly can. If you like this content, let me know. Hit the like button, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. Do it. It's important. It's real. The algorithm is a real thing. It's awful. Worse than sculpting chainmail. Oh, watch that cord. That's better. That's all I got for now. All right, see you guys next time. First up is this tool that I made of for working with softer clays like wed clay or soft Chavant or even medium grade Chavant. It scared the hell out of me. Stupid tripod dropped. And then I carved out the eye. What are those things called?